The question, what if Spider-Man was never bitten by the spider, opens up a realm of intriguing possibilities and alternate timelines. In this exploration, we'll dive into a world where Peter Parker's fate diverges from the moment he first encountered that radioactive spider. Without the transformative bite, Peter's life would be fundamentally different, and New York, indeed, the entire world, might be as well. Let's begin by reimagining Peter Parker's world without the iconic spider bite, and consider how the absence of that one event could reshape not only his personal life, but also the fate of the city he once protected. Without the bite, Peter's life would have taken a drastically different turn. Instead of gaining his incredible abilities, Peter would continue to live as a brilliant, albeit socially awkward, teenager in Queens. His relationships with his Aunt May and Uncle Ben, while still crucial, would take on a different dynamic. Peter might be more focused on his studies, excelling academically and socially, but there's still the possibility that he would remain an outsider, unsure of his place in the world. He may still be a good-hearted person, but his motivations for helping others would come from a more personal, human place, rather than the sense of responsibility instilled in him by his powers. Uncle Ben's death, a pivotal moment in Peter's origin, could still occur, but it would have a different impact on Peter's life. Without the spider bite, Peter wouldn't be equipped with the power to chase down the man responsible for Uncle Ben's death. He might still feel the deep sense of guilt, but his reaction could take a different form. Perhaps, without the abilities to intervene directly, Peter might channel his grief into more conventional means of justice, such as volunteering, activism, or joining law enforcement. However, it's likely he would still feel powerless in the face of crime, knowing that his uncle's death could have been avoided had he been in a position to act. The absence of Spider-Man also means Peter never adopts the iconic red and blue suit. His life, though filled with emotional struggles, might have fewer external conflicts. Without superpowers, Peter would likely have to face the same obstacles that ordinary people do, perhaps focusing on school, work, and relationships more intensely. He may develop different skills, perhaps focusing on science and technology in a way that leads to a career as an inventor or a researcher, rather than becoming the web-slinging hero we know. Without Peter Parker's transformation into Spider-Man, the vacuum left in New York City would be felt immediately. A city that once relied on the agile, quick-witted hero to keep it safe from various threats, both human and superhuman, would lack its most iconic protector. While heroes like Daredevil and the Fantastic Four might still exist in this alternate timeline, their influence wouldn't be as widespread or immediately recognized. The city might be more vulnerable, and the criminal elements might be bolder, more confident in their actions. Without Spider-Man's presence, New York would likely experience a shift in its underworld. Organized crime could thrive unchecked for a longer period of time. Villains like the Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, Vulture, and Kingpin might continue to exert their influence, but their actions could take longer to meet with resistance. Could someone else rise in Peter's place to challenge these villains? Perhaps Matt Murdock, also known as Daredevil, would become the sole protector of the city. He may rise to a higher status as New York's only protector, with his role becoming even more crucial, or perhaps other new heroes like the Punisher might emerge, filling the gap left by Spider-Man. Alternatively, there's the possibility that a new, darker vigilante could step into Spider-Man's shoes. Without Peter's moral compass guiding the direction of New York's heroism, someone with more of a ruthless streak might rise, like Venom, or even someone entirely new, creating a more complex and morally gray world for the residents of New York. In the absence of Spider-Man, the city would undoubtedly become more chaotic. The daily battle between good and evil would have a very different flavor. There would likely be fewer personal stories of redemption and responsibility, and perhaps a greater focus on raw power and vengeance. Without the spider bite, Peter would never experience the physical toll that comes with being Spider-Man. His body would likely be in better shape, as he wouldn't be constantly pushing his physical limits by web-slinging and fighting superpowered villains. He may excel in academics, but still struggle with the same social awkwardness that defined his early life. Without the external pressure of leading a double life, Peter might be more focused on his relationships with those around him, including Mary Jane Watson, Gwen Stacy, and his beloved Aunt May. His romance with Mary Jane might unfold in a different way. Perhaps he would be more open with her about his feelings, and their relationship could develop in a more typical fashion without the secrecy and drama that comes with being Spider-Man. They might date, eventually marry, and Peter might lead a life less complicated by the turmoil of superhero duties. However, even without the spider bite, Peter's life would still have its challenges. He might still experience the pain of unrequited love, loss, and self-doubt, but these would be things he faces without the additional weight of his secret identity. Without Spider-Man's heroism to guide his path, Peter might pursue a career in science, technology, or engineering, gaining the recognition he always deserved. He could become an influential figure in the scientific community, developing groundbreaking technologies. Perhaps, in this version of his life, Peter would never fully escape the shadow of his uncle's death, but his drive to help others would take a different form, one rooted in the practical, intellectual side of himself. Instead of saving the city with his webbing and agility, Peter would use his mind to improve lives through innovation. In this alternate timeline, Peter's most iconic villains would also follow different paths. Without Spider-Man to fight against, many of them would remain unchecked in their ambitions. The Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, and Sandman could continue their criminal activities, possibly growing in power, unopposed. With Spider-Man absent, the dynamics of their operations would be free to expand. It's possible that a new hero could rise to challenge them, but it's also possible that these villains could band together, creating an even larger and more dangerous threat than ever before. The absence of Spider-Man could also change their motivations. Without a direct adversary, some of Peter's foes might shift focus. Perhaps the Green Goblin never becomes the major threat to Peter's life, and instead remains a corporate mogul, using his wealth to further his own ambitions. Without Spider-Man's interference, the rise of villains like Venom or Carnage might take a different route, as their existence is often defined in opposition to Spider-Man. New York City would undoubtedly feel the loss of Spider-Man in many ways. As the city grows, so too would its challenges. Without the friendly neighborhood hero keeping things in check, we would see an increase in gang violence, theft, and corruption. Peter, though he would still have his brilliant mind and his desire to make the world a better place, might never rise to the occasion in the same way. The question remains, could someone else step into Spider-Man's role? Could other heroes rise to prominence in the void left by his absence? Or would the world simply become darker, with no shining figure to inspire hope? While the absence of Spider-Man might allow for a more dangerous New York, it also opens the door for new possibilities. Peter's life would certainly be different. He would still face personal struggles and challenges, but without the constant pressure of being a superhero, perhaps he would find a different kind of peace. The story of Spider-Man, it seems, is not just about one man's journey with incredible powers, but also about how those powers affect the world around him. Without Spider-Man to defend New York, the city would become a more vulnerable place. The void left by Peter Parker's absence as a protector would be felt immediately, especially as criminal elements within the city would grow bolder. Without the vigilance of Spider-Man, figures like the Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, Vulture, and others would likely continue their plans uninterrupted, seizing opportunities for greater power and influence. Without a direct adversary, these villains may grow in stature, perhaps even forming alliances, making them even more formidable. The lack of Spider-Man would also present a power vacuum in the city's criminal underworld. Gang activity could rise, as there would be no one to stop it, and New York could spiral into a more chaotic state. The absence of Spider-Man might also encourage the development of other darker figures in the shadows who might take the place of Peter as a symbol of hope, or perhaps someone who uses power for less than noble purposes. The lack of a familiar face in the form of Spider-Man might encourage these new vigilantes to take the law into their own hands, but whether they would succeed in protecting the city or cause further turmoil would remain an open question. Peter Parker, unaffected by his famous transformation, would continue living his life in an entirely different manner. Without the bite, his path would likely have been rooted in academics and the pursuit of knowledge. Peter would likely still be driven by the desire to make the world a better place, but without the extraordinary power to carry out that mission, he would likely follow more conventional avenues. He might still excel in his studies, perhaps pursuing a career in science, engineering, or technology, using his brilliance to innovate and improve lives. His character would likely retain the empathy and compassion that defines him, but without the iconic responsibility of being Spider-Man. His energy might go into helping people in a more grounded way. Peter might still struggle with social awkwardness and the pressures of living up to others' expectations, but without the guilt from failing to stop a criminal or prevent a tragedy. His life might be marked by fewer moments of anguish. His relationships, especially with Aunt May and his friends, could remain closer, as he would no longer be hiding a secret life. His connection with Mary Jane might flourish in a more traditional sense, without the complicated tension that comes with Spider-Man's secret identity. Without the weight of fighting supervillains or balancing his double life, Peter could be more present in these relationships, perhaps finding peace and balance earlier in his life. The absence of Spider-Man would also change the trajectory of Peter's enemies. Without a superhero like Spider-Man to challenge their schemes, the likes of Norman Osborn, Otto Octavius, and Flint Marko would have more room to grow, their ambitions unimpeded. Some of these villains may have pursued their personal goals without interference, possibly focusing on more complex, less direct means of achieving power. For example, Norman Osborn might still rise to prominence as a businessman, but without Spider-Man's constant interruptions, he could potentially grow even more powerful. Dr. Octopus, too, might continue his research and scientific endeavors, his brilliance unchallenged by any one person. With no Spider-Man to focus his destructive tendencies toward, these villains might turn their efforts elsewhere, perhaps finding themselves in a more traditional fight against law enforcement or other superheroes who would eventually arise. In the absence of Spider-Man, it is possible that the city could see a shift in its power dynamics, where villains do not just fight one hero, but engage in battles that are far more complicated and widespread. Additionally, the absence of Spider-Man would affect other heroes in the Marvel Universe. With a superhero landscape lacking Peter Parker's presence, heroes like Daredevil or the Avengers might step up in a more significant way. Without Spider-Man's agility and intellect on the front lines, others would be forced to take a more active role in keeping the city safe, especially in the face of more organized threats from villains who had previously been thwarted by Peter's intervention. Daredevil, for example, could rise in prominence as the city's protector. But it is also possible that the absence of Spider-Man would lead to a more fractured world of heroes, ones who may not work together as cohesively as when Spider-Man was part of the team. This could lead to a more fractured approach to combating crime, with heroes operating in isolation and villains taking advantage of the city's lack of unity. However, Peter's life, without the spider bite, would not be entirely free from its own set of challenges. While he may not face the physical toll that Spider-Man's life would demand, Peter would still confront the societal pressures of being a young man in a rapidly changing world. He might find fulfillment in his scientific pursuits, but it would come with its own struggles, perhaps in proving himself to his peers, dealing with the pressures of living up to his academic potential, or grappling with the reality that his brilliance might not always be enough to address the world's more complex issues. Peter would still face the challenges of being a bright young man, possibly struggling with feeling disconnected from the world around him. However, without the chaos of being Spider-Man, Peter's sense of self-worth would likely develop in different ways, perhaps more through personal connections, intellectual pursuits, or finding a career that satisfies his moral compass. His ambition could remain intact, and he could still become a force for good in the world, albeit through less extraordinary means. Yet, even without the iconic powers and responsibilities of Spider-Man, Peter Parker would never truly escape the impact of his uncle's death. Without Spider-Man to guide him, Peter might still struggle with guilt over not being able to stop the tragedy. However, without the lens of Spider-Man's guilt driving him, Peter might take a more direct approach to dealing with crime. He could become involved in social activism or work with law enforcement, striving to make a meaningful impact in ways that focus on systemic change. While he would not have the same dramatic ability to swing into action and stop a robbery or save someone from danger, Peter's intellect and empathy could still allow him to find alternative ways to make a difference in the world. Without Spider-Man, Peter Parker's life would be different in both subtle and profound ways. His relationships would likely be less complicated. His focus would remain on intellectual pursuits and career development, and his personal struggles would take on a different tone. However, the impact of the villains that Spider-Man once faced would be far-reaching, and the city would likely remain in constant turmoil without its friendly neighborhood hero to balance the scales of justice. Whether someone else would rise to take Spider-Man's place, or the city would continue to spiral into a more dangerous, unprotected state, is a central part of this alternate universe. Peter might not wear a mask or sling webs, but his impact on the world around him would still be felt, even if in quieter, more traditional forms of heroism. Ultimately, without Spider-Man, the world of New York would be much more fragile, but Peter would continue his fight for justice in his own way, learning that even without powers, heroism still exists in everyday choices and actions. As Peter continues to navigate life without the bite, the world around him changes in subtle yet profound ways. His intellectual prowess and his drive to help the world, though still central to his character, are now expressed through more conventional means. Peter's natural inclination towards science and problem-solving directs him toward a career in research, technology, or engineering. Without the powers of Spider-Man, he channels his genius into creating new technologies that benefit society, perhaps even working with government or non-profit organizations dedicated to improving the quality of life in New York. Instead of web-slinging across the city, Peter may be known for his groundbreaking contributions to robotics, nanotechnology, or renewable energy, fields that align with his innate curiosity and desire to improve the world. Peter's relationship with his Aunt May becomes more straightforward in this version of his life. The absence of the constant secret identity that kept him away and the guilt that haunted him leads to a deeper connection with her. There is no need to hide the truth of his late-night escapades or the constant fear that he might fail to protect the people he loved. In this reality, Peter can be a more present and supportive figure for Aunt May, helping her with everyday tasks and offering emotional support. Their bond, while still deeply affected by Uncle Ben's death, is not burdened by the same sense of guilt and responsibility that plagued Peter's actions when he was Spider-Man. However, even without the spider bite, Peter still struggles with his sense of identity. While he is not the hero in the traditional sense, he feels the pull to do something more with his life. The absence of Spider-Man leaves a void within him, as Peter's inherent desire to help others can't be fully satisfied by mere academic pursuits. His decision to become more involved with local communities and social activism grows, and Peter's voice, once quiet and reserved, becomes stronger. He could still become a vocal advocate for justice, even without the costume or the powers to fight villains directly. His work might focus on issues like poverty, environmental sustainability, or the inequities of New York's criminal justice system. By joining local efforts to reform education or support at-risk youth, Peter can channel his experiences, particularly his guilt over Uncle Ben's death, into creating opportunities for others. Still, Peter's personal life remains far from perfect. Without the superhero alter ego to help him compartmentalize his emotions, his relationships become more complicated. His romantic relationship with Mary Jane, for example, could go through many ups and downs. Without the rush of being Spider-Man, Peter is more open and vulnerable, but this also means that his deep-rooted fears, insecurities, and personal flaws become more apparent to those closest to him. Mary Jane, in this alternate reality, may still struggle with the complexities of dating someone so emotionally complicated. Their dynamic, though loving, would require a lot of work, as both would have to confront their own fears and expectations about their future together. In terms of Peter's social life, he would likely find more meaningful connections with friends and mentors who support him in more grounded ways. Without the distractions of crime fighting and the isolation brought on by his double life, Peter could build stronger, more authentic friendships. His bond with Harry Osborn, for example, might shift from a strained and distant relationship into one of deeper trust and understanding. Without the burden of Spider-Man's secret identity dividing them, Peter could be there for Harry in ways that would allow their friendship to thrive, perhaps even helping Harry overcome the shadow of his father, Norman Osborn, and the complexities of the Osborn family legacy. Yet, Peter would also come face to face with the harsh realities of a world that lacks his unique presence. The absence of Spider-Man would mean fewer victories in the fight against crime, and New York would suffer. While heroes like Daredevil might rise to prominence in the city's underbelly, Peter realizes that the need for a hero like Spider-Man is still there. Even if he doesn't wear the mask, he feels a moral obligation to do what he can. Without the physical powers of a superhero, Peter finds himself relying more heavily on his intellect and compassion to make a difference. He might work closely with the NYPD or local charities, using his knowledge of science and technology to develop solutions that address systemic problems within the city. There's a chance that without the thrill of superhero action, Peter would become more focused on creating long-term sustainable solutions to the challenges the city faces. In a world where Spider-Man never existed, New York would likely see a shift in its crime-fighting strategies. Heroes like Daredevil, perhaps with the guidance of other street-level defenders, might fill the gap left by Spider-Man. However, the absence of Spider-Man's influence could make the city feel less hopeful, a city under constant pressure from the ever-growing supervillain presence. Figures like the Kingpin might rise further in power without anyone to challenge them on the streets. Without Peter's quick wit, agility, and his ability to sense danger, New York could become a more dangerous and divided place, where lawlessness takes root. Villains like the Green Goblin or the Vulture could see fewer setbacks in their ambitions. Without Spider-Man to thwart their plans, these characters might evolve in different ways, possibly becoming more dangerous or more strategic. The Green Goblin, for instance, might expand his empire, perhaps focusing more on corporate manipulation or global crime syndicates. Dr. Octopus, meanwhile, might have more time to develop his technologies without Spider-Man's constant interference, possibly advancing his research into a new, more destructive direction. Even smaller-time criminals might find themselves emboldened by the absence of a hero who regularly disrupted their operations. While Peter's personal growth remains a cornerstone of his story, the world's need for a protector like Spider-Man would likely manifest in other ways. The question remains whether the city could continue to thrive without its iconic, web-slinging hero. While new vigilantes might emerge, the sense of hope and optimism that Spider-Man brought to the city would be replaced with a more cynical, fragmented approach to justice. Peter's life, without the bite, would be a life defined by his intellect, his passions, and his relationships. Yet, in this alternate world, he would still find that the pull to do more never truly goes away. Though he might never have the powers of a superhero, Peter's role in the world would still have meaning, not because of what he could do physically, but because of who he is and what he's willing to do for others. His legacy might not be as flashy as Spider-Man's, but it would still reflect the core of what it means to be a hero, someone who strives to make the world better, even without the extraordinary abilities that others might have. In this world where Peter Parker never became Spider-Man, the ripple effect on both his personal journey and the larger universe of heroes and villains is profound. Without the bite that catalyzed his transformation, Peter would continue to grow, but his evolution would be far different than the one shaped by his responsibilities as Spider-Man. His life might be defined by the pursuit of knowledge and the desire to better the world through innovation, but it would lack the deep, complex duality of being both a hero and a person struggling to maintain normality. Instead of web-slinging across New York, Peter might channel his energy into solving global crises using his intellect. His reputation could grow, not as a masked crusader, but as a brilliant mind committed to tackling the world's most pressing issues. One of the biggest challenges Peter would face, despite the absence of supervillains, is the ever-present human element, the struggle of trying to make meaningful connections. His tendency towards self-doubt, which Spider-Man's persona helped temper, would be more pronounced in this reality. Without the confidence that comes from knowing he can do extraordinary things, Peter might find himself wrestling with the mundane difficulties of life in a different way. Though Peter would undoubtedly find success in his academic and professional pursuits, he could still feel adrift in the vastness of the world. The absence of Spider-Man's sense of purpose leaves him with a lingering question. Without the responsibility of saving others, what does he truly live for? Peter's relationships would remain key to his emotional growth. His connection with Aunt May, while without the strain of Spider-Man's secret life, would still be marked by loss. The death of Uncle Ben, a moment that profoundly shaped Peter's moral compass, would continue to influence Peter, but without Spider-Man's guilt pushing him into action, his grief might take on different forms. Perhaps Peter would become more withdrawn, struggling to move beyond the memory of the man who instilled in him a sense of responsibility. Alternatively, Peter could channel his energy into honoring Uncle Ben's memory by working to improve the world through scientific advancements, philanthropy, or social reform. His relationship with Mary Jane could unfold in a far more conventional manner, but still complicated by Peter's inability to share everything about his past. Without the constant burden of hiding his superhero identity, Peter would be more emotionally available, but he would still carry the weight of his guilt, particularly the unresolved feelings surrounding Uncle Ben. Their love could bloom more naturally, and perhaps they could build a life together, but Peter's internal struggles, his desire to prove himself as someone who is more than just the boy who could never live up to the memory of his uncle, would likely cast a shadow over their relationship. At the same time, the absence of Spider-Man would create a greater sense of vulnerability in New York. Without Peter's vigilant presence, the city could fall into more frequent chaos as petty criminals and larger organized crime syndicates grow bolder in the absence of a hero who can match their intensity. While Daredevil might be a constant fixture in the shadows of Hell's Kitchen, and heroes like Iron Man and the Fantastic Four still exist, the people of New York would have no one like Spider-Man, someone who represented hope, persistence, and determination on the streets. The city might become a more dangerous place without the influence of a hero like Peter Parker, and perhaps the underworld would feel more emboldened. In this world, even if new heroes rise to confront threats, none would have the same emotional connection to the city or its people as Spider-Man did. His absence might create a ripple effect where the city becomes more fragmented, with its heroes unable to truly unite as they did when Spider-Man was part of the team. The villains of New York, once regularly thwarted by Spider-Man, might rise to new heights of power and influence. Without Spider-Man's agile presence, their schemes would go unchecked for longer. The Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, Sandman, and Kingpin might continue their reigns of terror without facing the same resistance, potentially growing more dangerous. The sense of villainy could become more entrenched in the city as these figures gain more control, with Spider-Man never stepping in to undo their plans. Some of the more personal antagonists, like Venom or Carnage, might never emerge, as Peter's unique connection to the symbiote and Eddie Brock wouldn't come into existence. However, the city would likely still face escalating threats, as more powerful villains move in to fill the void left by Peter's absence. The larger impact of Peter never becoming Spider-Man could also reach into the lives of the other major heroes in the Marvel Universe. For example, the Avengers, while still a formidable team, would lack one of their most agile and intelligent members. The absence of Spider-Man's unique combination of street-level heroism and quick-witted intellect might alter how they approach certain challenges. Characters, like Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor, might be forced to take on more responsibility, or they might lean on other members to fill the role Spider-Man once played in combating both small-time criminals and global threats. Likewise, Daredevil, without his sometimes tenuous alliance with Spider-Man, might find himself more isolated or forced into conflicts that would have been easier with Spider-Man's assistance. Without Spider-Man to disrupt the plans of criminal masterminds, the landscape of New York's crime would evolve. The Kingpin could see a rise in his influence, and criminals like Mysterio or the Lizard, though not as powerful as their superhuman counterparts, could be more emboldened to take action without a persistent hero thwarting their efforts. Spider-Man's absence would create a city where power dynamics shift dramatically, with some villains gaining more control than they ever had before. While other heroes might try to stop them, none would have the same combination of wit, agility, and personal connection to the city as Peter Parker did. But Peter, without the physicality of Spider-Man, would find himself confronting the moral dilemma of how he can help the world without extraordinary means. He could pursue activism or enter politics, using his voice to fight for justice and equity. It would be a different kind of heroism, one rooted in making incremental change rather than dramatic, physical battles against evil. Peter could be involved in education, advancing scientific research, or even helping to reform the criminal justice system, channeling his sense of responsibility into projects that aim to address societal issues on a macro level. His brilliance, combined with a more grounded moral compass, would allow him to make strides in improving the world, just not with webs and punches. While Peter may never get the chance to experience the thrilling highs of being Spider-Man or face the epic battles that define the Marvel Universe, he would still be a figure committed to bettering the world. His growth would come from dealing with life's real challenges rather than physical threats. And although New York streets would be a little quieter, a little darker, without Spider-Man, Peter would find his own quiet way to make a difference. He may never be the wall-crawling, web-slinging hero the city once needed, but Peter Parker would still be someone who cared, someone who believed in the possibility of change, no matter how small the steps toward it might be. As Peter continues his life without the powers of Spider-Man, the realization sets in that his actions still have consequences, even if they are less dramatic and more subtle than those of his superhero days. The absence of superhuman abilities forces him to confront the realities of being just an ordinary person in a world where extraordinary things happen every day. Yet this doesn't diminish his drive to help others or improve the world. Instead, it transforms the way he approaches problems, moving from the immediate physical interventions he once took to a more systemic approach. Peter's intellect, never fully utilized before, now becomes the cornerstone of his efforts. Without the weight of secret identities and constant battles with supervillains, Peter channels his energy into solving real-world problems, whether it's inventing groundbreaking technology to combat environmental issues or developing new forms of medicine to help those in need. His passion for science becomes his way of making an impact on the world, but instead of using it to create new weapons or fight crime, Peter uses it for the betterment of society in a more peaceful, sustainable way. He works tirelessly to address global challenges, creating solutions that could improve healthcare, tackle energy crises, or advance education, helping to bridge the gap between the scientific community and the general public. However, Peter's journey isn't without its internal struggles. Even without Spider-Man's burdens, the weight of responsibility continues to rest heavily on his shoulders. He still feels the loss of Uncle Ben and the overwhelming sense of guilt from not being able to save him. Though the absence of Spider-Man would have allowed Peter to move on in some ways, the emotional scars would never completely fade. He might not wear the mask, but he still holds the belief that he must use his talents for the greater good, even without the physical abilities to act on that belief in the same way. This sense of responsibility pushes Peter to continue pursuing ways to make a difference, but it also brings him face to face with the limitations of his own abilities. His relationships, though more stable than in his original timeline, still face complications. Mary Jane, while more open to a future with Peter, also grapples with the reality of their lives together. Peter's need to make a difference, and his inability to completely let go of his guilt, his desire to protect, and the lingering effects of his own self-doubt keep their relationship from reaching its full potential. Mary Jane sees the change in him, but there are still moments where she feels Peter's emotional distance, his constant drive to do more, to be more than just an ordinary man. There are times when Peter wonders whether he will ever be enough, if his lack of Spider-Man's powers will keep him from truly connecting with those he loves. But as time progresses, Peter learns that being present, showing vulnerability, and communicating his fears and hopes are more important than the superpowers he never had. While Peter works toward using his intellect for the betterment of society, his focus on global issues might start to alienate him from the city and the local community. Peter's inability to face the immediate problems in front of him, instead focusing on larger systemic changes, could cause him to miss the smaller, more personal aspects of life, those moments where he could make a real difference on a daily basis. In his drive to change the world through innovation and science, he might inadvertently neglect the people closest to him. In some ways, the absence of Spider-Man's ability to react to immediate threats creates a different type of isolation. Without the nightly battles, Peter finds himself wrestling with his sense of purpose. He may help solve global crises, but his connection to the people he cares about might feel fractured, leading him to question if he's truly making the difference he envisioned. The city of New York, while still home to heroes like Daredevil and the Fantastic Four, would continue to face challenges without Spider-Man to keep some of the smaller-scale crime in check. Supervillains like the Kingpin, the Green Goblin, and others would continue to cause chaos, perhaps with fewer heroes available to stop them. While the major threats would eventually be addressed by the larger hero community, the absence of a figure like Spider-Man, a local hero who could take care of the day-to-day troubles, would leave gaps that larger, more powerful figures would not be able to fill. The streets of New York might be more dangerous, with organized crime rising in prominence as it capitalizes on the lack of a quick, agile, and highly intuitive hero who can respond to threats in real time. Without Spider-Man's personal connection to the streets and the people, the city's crime scene might become more fragmented. While Daredevil might step in to protect Hell's Kitchen, other areas might be left vulnerable, susceptible to the rise of new dangerous players. A vigilante might emerge, but this figure might take a darker approach to justice, not guided by the moral compass Peter once maintained. The absence of Spider-Man's commitment to fighting not just criminals, but for the hearts and minds of the people, leaves room for a more cynical view of justice to take root in New York. Villains might seize power in new ways, taking advantage of the changing landscape of crime and heroism. The absence of Peter Parker's Spider-Man would also affect the trajectory of some of the more complex anti-hero figures like Eddie Brock, who would never become Venom. Without Peter's unique connection to the symbiote might never find a host, or it could latch on to someone else, creating an entirely different narrative for the villain. Venom's classic rivalry with Spider-Man might never come to fruition, and the story of Eddie Brock could be radically different, perhaps focusing more on his own personal struggles or seeking out other sources of power or revenge. In this reality, the lack of Spider-Man means that the symbiote never bonds with someone driven by such deep personal animosity toward a specific individual, and its story becomes one of more generic conflict, rather than deeply intertwined with Peter's journey. As Peter's life moves forward, he begins to understand that true heroism is not about the powers you possess or the dramatic victories you achieve, but about the daily choices you make to contribute to the world in meaningful ways. In the absence of Spider-Man's dramatic feats, Peter's heroism is quietly woven into his life through the work he does, the people he supports, and the way he chooses to confront his past. Though he may never have the recognition or the adventure that Spider-Man enjoyed, Peter's life still holds deep meaning. His legacy becomes less about the world-changing impact of a single man in a suit and more about the small, consistent efforts of a person who strives to be the best version of themselves, one who finds their way through intellect, compassion, and perseverance, not webs and strength. As time progresses, Peter Parker continues to confront the complexity of his dual nature without the familiar mantle of Spider-Man. The absence of powers leaves him to reflect on how much of his identity was intertwined with the heroic actions he once took. Though the absence of Spider-Man's identity brings a certain relief, it also reveals the emptiness that exists when he is forced to face the realities of a life without immediate purpose. The sense of responsibility that once defined him is now only a faint echo in his mind, replaced by the humdrum of daily life. A life that no longer carries the same sense of urgency, but instead one of quiet contemplation. Peter still feels the drive to do good, but without the outlet that his powers once gave him, his efforts now feel less significant. He focuses on innovation, research, and creating practical solutions to the world's challenges, but at times, a deep longing for something greater nags at him. The intellectual fulfillment of developing new technologies or contributing to scientific advancements may be rewarding, but Peter struggles to find the same sense of purpose he had when fighting for the lives of innocent people. He begins to question whether he is truly living a meaningful life or simply existing within the confines of the choices that have been handed to him. Though Peter thrives professionally, his emotional growth continues to be a struggle. The absence of Spider-Man means he has more time for personal reflection, and it is here, in these moments of quiet, that Peter begins to understand just how much his previous identity shaped his view of the world. Without the responsibility that Spider-Man once demanded, Peter has more time to focus on his relationships. His connection with Mary Jane becomes more grounded, though not without its challenges. While they no longer navigate the complexities of secret identities, they are still confronted with the struggles of understanding one another in the context of their evolving lives. Peter, without his role as Spider-Man, feels like a man struggling to find his place. Though his love for Mary Jane is strong, he realizes that their relationship, like his own growth, needs room to breathe. There is no immediate rush for resolution, no superhero battle or villain to defeat, and this newfound space allows both of them to grow, but also to reevaluate their desires for the future. Peter's interactions with his old friends, especially Harry Osborn, also shift in this reality. Without the conflict of Spider-Man and the tension of their respective secrets, Harry and Peter's friendship begins to deepen in a more honest way. The absence of Spider-Man also means Harry never fully adopts the dark path of becoming the Green Goblin, as his motivations were often deeply tied to his rivalry with Peter's alter ego. With no need to exact vengeance on Spider-Man, Harry might find his own path, one that could lead him to a more peaceful existence. Their relationship strengthens as Peter no longer has to hide his true identity from his best friend. Harry, freed from the shadow of his father's legacy, could forge a new future, one that involves rebuilding his own life away from the destructive forces that once consumed him. The broader world, though still suffering from its own issues, sees a shift in how heroism is defined. Without Spider-Man's daily vigilance, the city's crime rates might see a slow, steady rise. Villains like the Kingpin and the Green Goblin, who once tried to control the streets, now have fewer obstacles in their path. Daredevil's role in the city grows in importance, but it's clear that one person cannot carry the burden of protecting an entire metropolis. The lack of Spider-Man creates a gap in the city's defense that is not easily filled by one or even several heroes. The vacuum left by Peter's absence of web-slinging justice might lead to the rise of new, more sinister figures. Perhaps some criminals take advantage of the chaos, and others might rise, believing that in the absence of Spider-Man, they are free to push boundaries even further. The absence of Spider-Man's influence could also change how New York citizens view their heroes. Instead of a symbol of hope and perseverance, heroes like Daredevil, Luke Cage, or even Iron Man become the focus of the city's security. While they all play their part, the absence of Spider-Man means there is less of a connection to the community. Spider-Man's role as a neighborhood hero, someone who fought for the people of Queens, is irreplaceable. The feeling of a protector swinging through the city, helping the everyday citizen, would be gone, leaving behind a city where the heroes are often more remote and distant from the people they protect. It becomes clear that Spider-Man, with his street-level compassion and dedication, was more than just a fighter. He was a symbol of what it meant to care for others, even in the face of impossible odds. Peter's absence as Spider-Man also means that the city itself remains more vulnerable to the escalating threat of global supervillains. Without Spider-Man's quick reflexes and ability to outwit the most dangerous foes, the likes of Thanos, Ultron, or Doctor Doom would have fewer obstacles to their plans. The lack of a hero like Spider-Man would force other heroes, like the Avengers, to step up in ways that might not be in their original mandate. While they can handle global threats, New York's street-level crime becomes more difficult to manage, resulting in a more fractured and vulnerable city. Without Spider-Man's unique blend of agility, intellect, and sheer resilience, the city feels the weight of that absence deeply. In Peter's personal journey, his pursuit of becoming a greater force for good through his intellect continues. He might use his scientific knowledge to become a leader in creating new technologies that help in the fight against global warming, disease, and inequality. His work in research and development could place him in the spotlight, where he is recognized not for his physical feats, but for his ability to change the world with his mind. Though he may never become a superhero in the traditional sense, Peter would still become a hero, just a different kind of hero, one who faces the world's problems head-on through his brilliance rather than his webs. This different reality for Peter Parker is one where heroism is not about the battles fought against supervillains, but about the smaller, quieter battles he chooses to take on every day. His heroism is found in his pursuit of knowledge, his desire to make a difference through innovation, and his unyielding commitment to the people around him. It's a life where Peter's greatness comes not from fighting crime, but from using his genius to better the world in more subtle, lasting ways. Though New York City and Peter's personal life will never be the same without the iconic Spider-Man, the impact Peter Parker has, whether through the way he helps those around him or through the technology he develops to improve lives, remains significant. His journey continues, not defined by webs or superpowers, but by his willingness to confront his own limitations and use his strengths for the greater good. As Peter Parker moves forward in his life, continuing his work as an intellectual force for good, his journey evolves into something more profound than simply pursuing academic and professional success. The absence of Spider-Man leaves him to grapple with a deeper existential question: what does it truly mean to make an impact? Without the rush of heroism, Peter begins to understand that heroism does not necessarily involve physical battles or the use of power. True heroism, he realizes, is about inspiring others through action, integrity, and dedication to making the world better, one step at a time. This revelation becomes particularly significant as Peter finds himself mentoring younger minds. As a leading scientist, he starts a program that encourages young people, particularly those from underprivileged backgrounds, to pursue careers in technology, engineering, and science. He fosters a new generation of thinkers and creators, helping them see the value in using their intellect to solve global issues, just as he always wanted to. Through these efforts, Peter feels a sense of purpose, something he had longed for in the absence of his superhero days. By offering his mentorship and support to the future generation, Peter begins to see the ripple effects of his actions, understanding that the change he seeks can begin with small, focused efforts that contribute to something larger than himself. Meanwhile, New York City, though it faces the challenges of a growing criminal underworld and an increasing number of global threats, begins to evolve in response to these voids. While Spider-Man's absence is felt acutely by many, other figures step in to protect the streets. Heroes like Daredevil and Luke Cage take on more responsibility, their efforts becoming more pronounced in the daily lives of New Yorkers. While none of them quite replicate Spider-Man's influence, his ability to connect with the people and his personal involvement in the city's smaller issues, they provide some semblance of security. However, the city's dependency on these larger-than-life figures creates a stark contrast between them and the local heroes that would have emerged had Peter been able to lead a more active, street-level campaign against crime. Without the nuanced approach Spider-Man had towards solving New York's problems, the city remains more fragmented, and some neighborhoods are left in constant flux. Peter's own involvement in the city's issues also grows more prominent, though not as a caped crusader. Instead of web-slinging through the streets, he becomes involved in grassroots efforts, using his resources and intellect to empower local communities. He becomes a key player in pushing for better healthcare access, advocating for environmental policies that directly address New York's pollution problems, and working to improve the educational system in underserved areas. His efforts are now directed at the infrastructure of the city itself, and in doing so he begins to change lives in ways he never could have as Spider-Man. While the dangers of street-level crime are still present, Peter uses his position as a scientist and philanthropist to address the root causes of poverty and violence, believing that societal change begins with systemic reform. Though Peter's mind is occupied by his new sense of purpose, the emotional remnants of his past still linger, particularly in his personal relationships. Mary Jane, still a central figure in Peter's life, continues to struggle with her own journey. Their relationship, though based on a more honest connection than before, is still fraught with tension. Mary Jane's understanding of Peter's dedication to improving the world is strong, but she still sees the weight of his unresolved guilt about not being able to save Uncle Ben, and she worries about whether Peter is sacrificing too much for the greater good. The deep emotional bond between them allows for occasional moments of growth and connection, but the differences in their aspirations and the shadow of Peter's past often threaten to pull them apart. Peter understands that they may never be the perfect couple, but he also realizes that love requires constant effort, understanding, and respect, qualities that he is now more capable of offering. His relationship with Aunt May continues to evolve as well. Having seen Peter mature into a man who uses his intellect and compassion to create positive change, Aunt May is proud of him, but she also knows that Peter still carries the weight of his past. She encourages him to seek inner peace, to forgive himself for the mistakes he made, and to accept that he cannot control everything. Aunt May's wisdom continues to ground Peter, providing him with a sense of stability in a world that sometimes feels unpredictable. Though they've both had to grapple with loss, their bond becomes even stronger as Peter learns to lean on her more, understanding that his own healing is a shared process. The world at large, while not necessarily as chaotic as it would be if Spider-Man were around, continues to evolve in response to its own threats. Without Spider-Man's influence, the actions of other villains, such as the Kingpin, continue unchecked. The city's need for a hero becomes even more apparent, though no one can quite fill the void Spider-Man left behind. There's a growing sense that New York, though strong and resilient, is missing the figure who once embodied the everyday fight against evil, the friendly neighborhood hero who could swing into action at a moment's notice. As Peter's personal and professional life continue to evolve, he begins to understand that heroism is not about fighting battles with villains in masks and capes. True heroism lies in the choices we make every day and how we show up for others, how we act in the face of adversity, and how we choose to leave a legacy that betters the world. Peter has learned to use his mind for innovation, his heart for compassion, and his voice to inspire others. Even without the powers of Spider-Man, he has found his own way to contribute meaningfully to society. Ultimately, Peter's journey is one of self-acceptance. He knows that he may never fully escape the shadow of his past, nor does he need to. He has come to terms with the fact that being a hero isn't defined by superhuman abilities or dramatic feats, but by the small, consistent actions we take to make a difference. Whether through mentorship, his career, or his love for those closest to him, Peter has learned that every step forward, no matter how small, is a victory. Though Peter may never be the web-slinging superhero the city once needed, he has found a new sense of purpose, a purpose grounded in love, intellect, and the desire to make the world a better place, one meaningful contribution at a time. As Peter continues to embrace his new path, the focus shifts to the larger consequences of living in a world where Spider-Man never existed. While Peter's efforts to improve society through his intellect and compassion are commendable, they also highlight the challenges that emerge in the absence of a symbol like Spider-Man, who once bridged the gap between ordinary people and larger-than-life heroes. The city of New York, with its complex dynamics of crime, corruption, and power struggles, continues to evolve in ways that test its resilience without a street-level hero who could swing into action at a moment's notice. The criminal underworld, unchallenged by the ever-watchful eyes of Spider-Man, begins to grow more emboldened. The Kingpin's empire, which once seemed to be confined to the shadows, expands into new territories. Without Spider-Man to thwart his plans, the Kingpin consolidates more power, turning the streets of New York into a more dangerous place. Crime syndicates become more entrenched, and smaller criminals, once easily dispatched by the web-slinging hero, feel more comfortable operating without fear of immediate retribution, while other vigilantes like Daredevil continue their work in the more grim corners of the city. The absence of Spider-Man's unique role, acting as both a protector of the people and a symbol of hope, creates a vacuum in the city's social fabric. Despite the growing chaos, the broader hero community begins to step up in different ways. Without Peter Parker's involvement as Spider-Man, some might argue that New York becomes more reliant on figures like Daredevil and Luke Cage, who represent a different kind of heroism, one rooted in resilience and endurance. However, these heroes lack the same agility, intellect, and connection to the city's everyday struggles that Spider-Man provided. While Daredevil does his part to keep the streets safe, and Iron Man occasionally steps in to handle larger global threats, there's no one to protect New York's inhabitants from the day-to-day dangers that Spider-Man once so reliably took care of. The city, while still home to its strong heroes, becomes a more fractured place, where protection is inconsistent and unpredictable. In the absence of Spider-Man's vigilant presence, some people in the city begin to feel a sense of loss. The younger generation, who grew up idolizing the web-slinger, now see heroes like Daredevil and Iron Man, but the lack of a relatable everyday hero means that there's a growing disconnect between the people of New York and those who protect them. Spider-Man was a hero who could connect with the common person, not through overwhelming power, but through compassion, humor, and relatability. Without Spider-Man, many of New York's citizens begin to question whether the city has lost its spirit, its optimism, and its connection to the idea that anyone, even a regular person like Peter Parker, can become a hero. Meanwhile, Peter Parker continues to evolve personally. Though he's not the superhero he once might have been, he realizes that his sense of purpose remains intact, albeit in a different form. Through his work in technology, education, and social reform, Peter begins to see how much he can contribute to society without wearing the mask. He still feels the responsibility of helping others, but rather than reacting to immediate threats, he now looks for long-term solutions to societal issues, tackling everything from access to education, to improving social infrastructure, to tackling environmental challenges. Peter's shift toward a life of intellectual and emotional service allows him to touch lives in ways he hadn't imagined before. His scientific work continues to evolve, and he becomes a key figure in developing innovative solutions to some of the world's most pressing issues. Yet, despite his professional success, Peter still grapples with his past, the memory of Uncle Ben's death, and the realization that even with all his accomplishments, he may never fully make peace with the man he could have been, had things turned out differently. Mary Jane continues to play an essential role in Peter's life, and their relationship grows stronger despite the challenges they face. Though Peter no longer has the secret identity of Spider-Man to complicate their relationship, they still confront the deeper issues that exist within their connection. Peter's emotional distance, his guilt, and his fear of not being enough, without the external validation that Spider-Man once provided, still create a divide. Mary Jane's unwavering support of Peter, however, helps him confront these fears. Their relationship, though still evolving, becomes a testament to the growth they both experience. They support each other as they both navigate their respective journeys of self-discovery, trying to understand how to live in a world where the extraordinary is often replaced by the mundane. The loss of Spider-Man also affects the dynamics of Peter's relationship with his old friends. Harry Osborn, free from the shadow of his father's legacy, begins to flourish in a way that would not have been possible had Spider-Man remained a constant part of their lives. Without the rivalry between Peter and Spider-Man's alter ego hanging over their heads, Harry's own path is clearer. He finds a sense of purpose beyond the competition and anger that once marked his relationship with Peter. As a result, the two old friends begin to rebuild their bond, forging a new, healthier friendship that stands outside of the complex webs they once found themselves tangled in. This healing comes slowly, but over time, Harry becomes a steady support in Peter's life, something he might not have been able to offer if the weight of their shared history had continued to define their interactions. The city of New York, while still grappling with the absence of Spider-Man, also learns to adapt. Over time, the streets might become safer due to the efforts of local heroes and increased cooperation among various factions of crime fighters. However, New York's spirit is undoubtedly altered by the lack of a figure who once embodied hope in a way that no one else could. Spider-Man, with his everyman charm and relatability, was a hero who connected with the city's people in a way that none of the other superheroes could. The city may survive, but its soul feels the loss. There's a collective recognition that despite the presence of other heroes, Spider-Man was something unique. He was the heartbeat of New York, the one hero who always had time for the little guy, the one who was always there when the odds were stacked against the people. Peter, in many ways, begins to understand that his role in the world isn't defined by whether or not he wears a costume or fights supervillains. Instead, It's about the everyday choices he makes, the relationships he nurtures, and the way he strives to make the world better. While he may never be the web-slinging hero that New York remembers, he finds peace in knowing that he is still capable of having a positive impact on the world, even in the absence of Spider-Man's dramatic feats. In this world, Peter Parker's heroism is not about defeating villains or saving the city from destruction. It is about finding ways to contribute, grow, and learn every day. The world may not have Spider-Man, but it has Peter, and that in itself is enough. As Peter Parker continues to redefine what it means to be a hero without the iconic mantle of Spider-Man, his journey evolves in unexpected ways. In his quest to make a difference, he begins to realize that true impact doesn't always come from grand gestures, but from the everyday, sometimes unseen, work he does to better his community and the world around him. He grows into a figure who doesn't need a mask to inspire change. His intellect, empathy, and desire to do good are his true powers. One significant turning point in Peter's journey occurs when he becomes increasingly involved in local politics. Recognizing that systemic change often starts with policy, Peter begins working alongside influential figures to advocate for reforms. His advocacy for education, climate change, and social justice finds a receptive audience, and his background in science gives him the credibility to speak on matters of technology and innovation. As a spokesperson for progressive change, Peter uses his knowledge to push for legislation that would tackle long-standing issues in New York, issues that Spider-Man, for all his good intentions, could never quite solve. Peter's ability to influence public policy becomes his new form of heroism. However, Peter's growing influence does not come without its complications. His involvement in politics forces him into the public eye in a way he has never experienced before. As he navigates the challenges of being both a scientist and a public figure, Peter is forced to confront the pressures of his responsibilities. The media begins to notice his efforts, and while some praise him for his commitment to improving society, others are quick to criticize him for not doing enough or for his previous ties to more radical ideas. The legacy of Spider-Man's absence weighs heavily on him, as critics point out that despite his intelligence, he is still just another politician and perhaps not a true hero in their eyes. Peter realizes that being in the spotlight brings with it not only praise but also scrutiny. It's a lesson in learning to live with the idea that doing the right thing won't always make everyone happy. In his personal life, Peter's relationships with Mary Jane and Aunt May continue to evolve. His emotional maturity, having grown through his journey of self-acceptance, begins to show in how he handles conflicts with those closest to him. His relationship with Mary Jane, though still deeply complicated, finds new layers of understanding. She too has grown over the years, and together they begin to understand that their love isn't built on perfection, but on mutual respect, growth, and acceptance. Their bond becomes a partnership in every sense, one that is grounded in the realities of life, not the fantasy of heroism. Aunt May, too, plays a central role in Peter's transformation. Though her health continues to be a source of concern, her wisdom remains a guiding force for Peter. She remains steadfast in her belief that Peter has done more than enough for the world, and her pride in him, even as he moves away from his former identity as Spider-Man, continues to be a source of strength. However, as Aunt May grows older, Peter is forced to face the inevitable reality of loss. The fear of losing her, something he never had to confront when he was Spider-Man, hits him harder than ever. In this, he learns the true meaning of living in the moment and cherishing every relationship. Her aging teaches Peter the importance of leaving behind a legacy, not just of academic achievements, but of love, compassion, and integrity. As Peter continues to affect change in his community, the impact of his choices becomes more apparent. He begins to see how even the smallest efforts, whether it's donating to a local shelter, mentoring a struggling student, or contributing to environmental causes, can ripple out to create a larger, lasting impact. His intellectual achievements, while impressive, are not what define him. It's his willingness to step up, to speak out, and to put his energy into solving the real problems faced by everyday people that defines Peter as a true hero. But the road isn't without its challenges. As Peter becomes a more public figure, he finds himself at odds with some of his old friends and acquaintances. The larger superhero community, though still respecting his contributions, cannot fully understand his shift away from crime fighting. They view him with a degree of skepticism, uncertain whether his decision to avoid heroism on the streets means he has abandoned his responsibility to protect New York. Though Peter's actions in politics and social reform are admirable, some feel that without Spider-Man's presence, there is a growing sense of vulnerability in the city. This growing tension reaches a climax when a new, larger threat begins to loom over New York. The Kingpin, now more entrenched in his criminal operations, pushes his influence into the upper echelons of the city's political system. His machinations go largely unnoticed by most, but Peter, with his political connections and scientific expertise, begins to uncover the depth of the conspiracy. This new danger puts Peter in a position where his intellect and compassion may not be enough. He realizes that the world he's built, the networks he's formed, and the positive changes he's made will only last if the forces of corruption and crime are removed. For the first time in years, Peter must confront the possibility that he might have to take action, in a way that involves more than just words or political maneuvering. The idea of becoming involved in street-level crime fighting once again weighs heavily on him. Peter, now older and wiser, must grapple with whether or not he can still be the protector the city needs. The absence of Spider-Man's influence becomes more apparent as the city begins to spiral, and the people of New York wonder if they'll ever have a hero they can rely on again. In confronting this challenge, Peter realizes that heroism is not just about the big fights. It's about the willingness to face adversity, to make tough choices, and to protect the values that matter most. Without the mask, without the webbing, Peter must navigate this new fight in a way that relies on everything he has learned over the years. He can't be Spider-Man, but he can still be Peter Parker, a man with the courage to face whatever comes his way, even when the odds are stacked against him. This moment of reckoning serves as the culmination of Peter's transformation. He realizes that he has been a hero all along, not because of the powers he once had, but because of the strength he developed within himself. This is the true legacy of Spider-Man, not the physical acts of heroism, but the emotional and intellectual resilience to face a world that is ever-changing, ever-challenging. Peter learns that heroism doesn't have to be flashy or world-changing. It can simply be the quiet determination to keep moving forward, to keep helping others, and to keep doing the right thing, even when it's hard. As Peter Parker continues to evolve, the challenges of living in a world without Spider-Man's powers and responsibilities come to a head. His efforts to effect change through his intellect, political advocacy, and personal relationships have shaped him into a different kind of hero, one who works behind the scenes to create systemic improvements rather than engaging in physical battles. However, as he becomes more entrenched in his work, He faces the inevitable clash between his ideals and the harsh realities of a world still governed by crime, corruption, and power struggles. The turning point in Peter's journey comes when he is confronted by a formidable new villain, one whose rise to power is directly tied to the absence of Spider-Man. The Kingpin, now more powerful than ever, has ingrained himself in the political structure of New York City. His criminal empire is not just a network of petty criminals anymore. It is a force that shapes policy, controls wealth, and manipulates the very foundations of the city. His unchecked influence has allowed corruption to spread like a cancer through both the streets and the halls of power, making it increasingly difficult for anyone to fight back. Peter, while still committed to his intellectual pursuits and social reforms, cannot ignore the growing sense of unease that has settled in the city. His inability to protect it, to fight the more insidious forces at play, gnaws at him. Though he has turned to more peaceful methods of contributing to society, the rise of the Kingpin and his iron grip on New York makes it clear that the city needs a more direct form of intervention. This realization marks a pivotal moment in Peter's journey, one where he must confront his fear of slipping back into the life of a vigilante. The question becomes whether he can ignore the call to action once again, or if he will embrace his old responsibilities, despite the potential risks to his personal life and emotional well-being. Peter, now older and wiser, begins to weigh the decision with a sense of gravitas. He recognizes that his powers were never what made him a hero. It was his empathy, intellect, and unrelenting desire to protect those he loved. With this in mind, Peter realizes that he doesn't need to rely on his old powers to fight for what's right. He has the resources, the knowledge, and the connections to make a real difference. This time, however, instead of fighting on the streets as Spider-Man, Peter decides to take on the Kingpin's empire from within the system. His approach is calculated and methodical, using his scientific acumen to expose the Kingpin's criminal activities and dismantle his operations from the inside out. Peter's decision to return to action, but in a more intellectual and strategic capacity, reflects his growth as a person. No longer driven by the need for validation or the excitement of battle, Peter approaches this challenge as someone who has learned that true heroism comes from making the right choices, even when it's difficult. He begins to use his resources to gather evidence, connect with whistleblowers, and leverage his influence to expose the Kingpin's corruption to the public. This time, Peter is no longer just a street-level hero. He is a crusader for justice, working within the boundaries of the law to take down the criminal empire that has poisoned his city. While Peter works behind the scenes, other heroes in New York begin to take notice of his efforts. Daredevil, already entrenched in the fight against crime in the city's darker corners, joins forces with Peter, albeit cautiously. Though they have different approaches, their combined efforts allow them to chip away at the Kingpin's empire. Together, they use a blend of legal strategy and street-level action to make significant strides in dismantling the Kingpin's operations. The two heroes form an unexpected but effective alliance, proving that even in the absence of Spider-Man's powers, the city can still find hope in unity and collective action. Peter's personal life, meanwhile, continues to evolve. His relationship with Mary Jane, though initially strained by the pressures of his work, grows stronger as they learn to navigate the complexities of their new reality. Mary Jane, always supportive of Peter's passion to make a difference, begins to understand his inner conflict. She sees the weight that Peter carries, the guilt over Uncle Ben's death, the fear of becoming a man who can no longer make an impact, and offers him the emotional support he needs to keep going. Their love deepens as they confront the challenges of living in a world without Spider-Man, with both learning that their future together will be shaped by compromise, understanding, and mutual growth. Aunt May, too, continues to play a vital role in Peter's life. Though her health begins to decline with age, she remains a source of wisdom and encouragement. Her guidance helps Peter remain grounded, reminding him that heroism isn't about grand, dramatic victories. It's about the consistent, often unnoticed efforts that build a better world over time. Her belief in Peter's ability to do good without the need for the mask strengthens his resolve, providing him with the emotional fortitude to continue on his path. As Peter's efforts to bring down the Kingpin's empire begin to yield results, he realizes that the true measure of his success isn't in the triumph over villains or the victories he achieves. Rather, it's in the quiet, enduring change that he has helped foster. In this alternate reality where Spider-Man never existed, Peter has found his own form of heroism, not through physical combat, but through intellectual and strategic efforts that slowly but surely dismantle the systems of corruption that plague New York. His work continues to leave a lasting impact, not through grand headline-making actions, but through consistent, behind-the-scenes efforts that bring about lasting societal change. The city, once teetering on the brink of chaos, begins to heal as Peter, with the help of his allies, fights to restore the balance that was lost in the absence of Spider-Man. Though Peter no longer swings through the streets, he still plays a vital role in protecting New York's future, proving that even without the extraordinary powers of Spider-Man, the drive to do good can still change the world. As Peter Parker fully embraces his role in the fight for justice through intellect and advocacy, his personal evolution continues to unfold in unexpected yet deeply impactful ways. His journey away from the physical, mask-wearing heroism of Spider-Man to a more intellectual and systemic form of heroism forces him to confront new challenges, ones that require patience, strategy, and endurance rather than swift action. Though he no longer possesses the extraordinary abilities that made Spider-Man such a beloved figure, Peter now understands that true heroism lies in consistency, dedication, and the ability to inspire others. The people of New York, though they may not always recognize the quiet work Peter is doing behind the scenes, begin to notice a subtle shift in the city. The Kingpin's once ironclad hold on the criminal underworld begins to loosen as Peter's efforts start to bear fruit. He uses his scientific expertise to expose corruption in the political system, working with law enforcement to piece together evidence and gather crucial testimonies that threaten the Kingpin's empire. His methodical approach, rooted in intellect, patience, and his desire to help the public, proves to be an effective counterbalance to the overwhelming power the Kingpin once wielded. As Peter begins to dismantle the Kingpin's influence, the balance of power in New York starts to shift, and the city begins to breathe a little easier, even if only for a moment. Peter's growing sense of purpose, fueled by the work he is doing to improve the city, leads him to more opportunities for collaboration. Daredevil, whose vigilance in Hell's Kitchen has been one of the few constant protections in the city's darker corners, becomes one of Peter's most trusted allies. While Daredevil fights crime in the streets, Peter works from within the political and scientific landscapes to address the root causes of crime and corruption. Their alliance, built on mutual respect for each other's methods, becomes a powerful force for change. Together, they make headway, exposing key figures in the Kingpin's network and slowly but surely crippling his ability to control the city. The heroism they embody is not based on flashy battles or superhuman feats, but on an enduring commitment to the fight for justice. The work Peter does, though slow and incremental, sparks a sense of hope in the people of New York. As the city begins to recover from the hold the Kingpin had on it, More and more individuals are emboldened to take action in their own ways. Peter's intellectual approach to heroism shows them that change doesn't always come from the top down or through violence. Sometimes the real power lies in the ability to effect small changes within a system that has long been broken, and to do so with humility, dedication, and resilience. In his personal life, Peter continues to wrestle with the impact of his decision to forgo the Spider-Man identity. While Mary Jane's support remains unwavering, their relationship faces challenges as they both grow into new versions of themselves. Peter's emotional growth, though significant, is still incomplete, and he finds himself grappling with feelings of inadequacy. Without the immediate validation that being Spider-Man once gave him, Peter often questions whether his work is truly enough. His guilt over not being able to save Uncle Ben, a constant undercurrent in his life, sometimes resurfaces, especially when he feels as though he isn't doing enough. Mary Jane, understanding Peter's deep internal struggle, continues to offer him the love and support he needs, even if she doesn't fully understand the emotional weight Peter carries. Their love, though not without its challenges, strengthens as they learn to communicate more openly and share the burdens of their respective journeys. Aunt May, too, continues to play a pivotal role in Peter's life. While her health remains a concern, her emotional strength provides Peter with the grounding he needs to face his fears. Her belief in him never wavers, and through her unwavering support, Peter begins to come to terms with the fact that he can never fully escape the shadow of Spider-Man. Instead, he learns to accept it as part of who he is, understanding that his past, though filled with mistakes, is also what has shaped him into the person he is today. As Peter faces the reality of losing Aunt May, he is forced to confront his deepest fears, not just about his own inadequacies, but about his capacity for love, loss, and redemption. Her presence in his life, though fading, remains a constant source of wisdom and emotional strength. While Peter's journey is one of personal and professional growth, the larger world continues to present new challenges. The absence of Spider-Man's iconic presence in New York leaves a gap, but the city has begun to adapt. With the Kingpin's power waning and the emergence of other heroes like Daredevil and Luke Cage, New York starts to regain a sense of balance. However, the city's vulnerability is still apparent. Peter knows that even though he is making progress, the fight for justice is never truly over. The criminals, the corrupt officials, and the power-hungry figures who once thrived in Spider-Man's absence will continue to test the resilience of the people. But Peter has learned that heroism is not about fighting for recognition or glory. It is about the quiet persistence to keep going, to keep helping, and to keep improving the world, even when the battles seem small or the victories feel distant. He has found his own form of heroism, not through webs and superhuman feats, but through his ability to inspire change, to foster understanding, and to tackle the challenges of the world with the tools at his disposal. In this new phase of his life, Peter realizes that being Spider-Man was never just about the power he wielded. It was about the responsibility he took on and the choices he made in those moments of crisis. His new path may not involve swinging through the city or facing down supervillains, but it involves an even greater commitment, the decision to be a hero in the quieter, more personal moments of life. And in these moments, Peter begins to understand that he doesn't need to wear a mask to be the hero the world needs. As Peter Parker's role in New York evolves, the impact of his decisions and the changes he's brought about begin to take a more lasting form. The Kingpin's empire has been significantly weakened but not eliminated. Peter, with his intellectual and strategic approach, continues to expose the cracks in the system, revealing corruption and working to dismantle the infrastructure that allowed the kingpin to thrive for so long. Though Peter no longer wears the Spider-Man suit, his influence remains felt in the city. He is now a symbol not of physical power, but of intellectual courage and moral resilience. As his political and social influence grows, Peter's involvement with New York's most vulnerable populations becomes more pronounced. He focuses on addressing systemic issues such as income inequality, affordable health care, and the accessibility of education. His work with at-risk youth becomes one of his primary outlets for action, as he mentors young minds and encourages them to pursue careers in science, technology, and activism. Peter begins to see that through these small efforts, he is planting the seeds for a better future. By sharing his knowledge and guiding the next generation, he helps empower those who are often overlooked by the larger systems of power. This commitment to long-term change is now Peter's way of fighting for justice through education, advocacy, and community engagement. Though his life is far from perfect, Peter finds a sense of peace in this new form of heroism. Mary Jane, though still deeply supportive of Peter's work, continues to express her concerns about his emotional distance. Peter's tendency to pour himself into his work and his need to constantly fight for justice sometimes alienates her. She sees that while Peter is making a tangible impact on the world, he is also isolating himself emotionally. Their relationship reaches a critical juncture when Peter, in his pursuit of justice, begins to neglect the emotional needs of those closest to him. Mary Jane's patience, though enduring, is tested as she grapples with the reality that Peter's definition of heroism may not always align with her own needs for connection and intimacy. Their relationship, while filled with love, becomes a reminder for Peter that true heroism is not just about saving the world or changing systems, it's about finding balance. Over time, Peter realizes that part of being a hero means being emotionally present for the people he loves. He begins to recognize that while he has the power to change the world through his intellect and his work, his ability to change his personal relationships is equally important. With this realization, Peter makes a conscious effort to nurture his relationship with Mary Jane, learning that heroism can also be about showing vulnerability and making time for those who matter most. Peter's work with the city's most vulnerable also brings him into contact with others who share his vision for a better future. As he builds a network of like-minded activists, scientists, and community leaders, Peter begins to see that his role is more than just that of a hero. He is becoming a leader. He is able to guide others in making a difference. But this new role also comes with its own set of challenges. The pressure to lead, to have all the answers, weighs on him. Peter often finds himself questioning whether he is doing enough or whether his efforts are truly making a difference. But as he sees the changes in the lives of the people he mentors, the progress in the communities he works with, and the tangible impact of his advocacy, Peter begins to find a sense of fulfillment that was once missing in his life. While New York City continues to grow and evolve, the underlying issues of crime, corruption, and social inequality still loom large. The void left by Spider-Man, while partially filled by other heroes, remains significant. The city needs a symbol of hope, one that can resonate with its citizens and show them that even in the darkest times, there is always a chance for change. Though Peter no longer swings through the city, his contributions to New York's future provide that hope. His efforts, although quiet and sometimes unseen, are the backbone of the city's transformation. His willingness to take on the challenges of the system, to address the root causes of the city's problems, ensures that his impact will be felt for generations. The more Peter works to better the world, the more he understands that heroism is not about dramatic battles or saving the city in a single stroke. It is about the everyday choices we make, the relationships we cultivate, and the ability to contribute to a larger vision of justice and equity. Though he may never fully escape the shadow of his past as Spider-Man, Peter learns to embrace who he has become, a man who fights for justice in ways that don't require webs or capes. The quiet strength that Peter now embodies, the resilience that drives him forward, becomes the true legacy of Spider-Man, not in the battles he won, but in the lives he touched and the changes he inspired. The realization that Peter has achieved something profound comes not in the form of grand public victories, but in the small personal moments where he sees the difference he's made. When he sees a young person he mentored succeed in their career, or when he helps a community rally together to improve their living conditions, Peter knows that he is doing what he was always meant to do, making the world better, one step at a time. It's not the excitement of swinging through the city that defines Peter Parker anymore, but the quiet impact of his intellect, his heart, and his dedication to helping those around him. In the end, Peter Parker's legacy is not measured in the number of villains defeated or the physical feats he accomplished as Spider-Man. His true legacy lies in the quiet, everyday heroism he now embodies, a hero who continues to fight for a better world, not through extraordinary abilities, but through the strength of his character and the compassion he shows to those who need it most. As Peter Parker moves further along his journey of intellectual heroism and social reform, the world around him continues to evolve in response to the changes he has helped instigate. The city of New York, once dominated by crime and the looming threat of supervillains, begins to shift toward a future built on collaboration, empathy, and community-based efforts. While crime still exists, and villains like the Kingpin and other remnants of the underworld continue to operate, Peter's work has left an indelible mark on the way New Yorkers view heroism. The focus is no longer on defeating a singular enemy, but on dismantling the systems that perpetuate inequality and injustice. Peter, now more entrenched in his role as a leader and innovator, finds himself at the forefront of a new era of social and technological progress. He collaborates with philanthropists, fellow scientists, and local politicians to design new systems of governance and social support that aim to break the cycle of poverty and crime that has plagued New York for so long. His projects address housing, education, and healthcare, issues that Spider-Man could never truly resolve in his short battles against street-level criminals. As Peter uses his genius to create sustainable solutions, he understands that his true legacy lies not in the short-term victories, but in the lasting systemic changes he's contributed to society. Despite the growing success of his efforts, Peter never fully sheds the weight of his past. Though he has come to terms with the fact that he will never be Spider-Man again, he still carries the emotional scars of his earlier life. The loss of Uncle Ben and the guilt over not being able to prevent his death still haunt him. However, Peter learns to view these moments not as burdens, but as lessons that have shaped him into the person he is today. He realizes that without his past, without the person he was as Spider-Man, he wouldn't have become the man capable of creating lasting change in the world. His ability to forgive himself, to let go of the mistakes he made as a young man, becomes the final key to his emotional healing. His relationship with Mary Jane continues to grow, albeit slowly. While their love is strong, it is no longer defined by the tumult of secret identities and dramatic rescues. Instead, their relationship becomes rooted in understanding and shared purpose. Mary Jane supports Peter in his work, but she also pushes him to prioritize their relationship and their future together. Peter learns that, while his work is important, it cannot come at the cost of those he loves. The emotional balance between his career, his commitment to social change, and his personal life remains delicate. But Peter becomes better at finding harmony between them. As Mary Jane and Peter move forward, they begin to build a life together that is grounded in love, trust, and mutual growth, without the need for dramatic sacrifices. Aunt May, though still dealing with her health issues, remains a pillar of support for Peter. Her wisdom and love continue to provide him with the stability he needs as he faces the pressures of being a public figure and leader. In her quiet moments of reflection, Aunt May imparts to Peter that true heroism is found not in the fame or recognition one achieves, but in the everyday acts of kindness and the quiet battles fought in the hearts of those we care about. Her constant belief in Peter's potential, even as she faces the inevitability of her own mortality, gives Peter the courage to keep pushing forward. The realization that his actions have meaning beyond himself gives him a profound sense of peace, knowing that he is making a real difference in the world for future generations. The villainous figures, who once defined New York's crime-ridden streets, are no longer the central focus of Peter's life. The kingpin, though still powerful, finds his influence waning as Peter's community-based reforms take hold. While not fully defeated, the kingpin's operations become increasingly limited by the weight of public opinion and the growing opposition from the people he once controlled. Peter's role in dismantling criminal empires has evolved from confronting these villains head-on to exposing their vulnerabilities through systemic change. By addressing the root causes of crime, poverty, lack of education, and inequality, Peter weakens the foundation upon which villains like the Kingpin built their power. The shift in the city's focus away from individual acts of heroism to systemic solutions becomes the defining theme of Peter's later life. Even though he no longer battles supervillains on the streets, Peter Parker remains a central figure in New York's ongoing struggle for justice. The city, though far from perfect, begins to embrace a new kind of heroism, one that is rooted in collaboration, understanding, and long-term commitment to change. Peter's work and leadership have inspired a new generation of activists, scientists, and political leaders who continue to build on the foundation he helped lay. The legacy of Spider-Man may have faded, but the impact of Peter Parker, the man who used his brilliance, his compassion, and his sense of justice to make a real difference, remains. Peter's story, though no longer defined by the thrill of battling villains or saving the day in traditional superhero fashion, shows that heroism can take many forms. Whether through his work with underprivileged communities, his efforts to address systemic corruption, or his commitment to improving the lives of everyday people, Peter's life is a testament to the idea that true greatness lies not in the grandeur of the actions we take, but in the quiet, steady efforts that accumulate over time. His journey reminds us that, even in a world without Spider-Man's physical abilities, there is always room for someone to rise up and make a lasting impact. The absence of Spider-Man may have left a hole in New York, but Peter Parker's legacy, shaped by the lessons of his past, ensures that the fight for justice, compassion, and equality will never truly end. It simply transforms into something more enduring and meaningful, something that is driven not by the rush of power, but by the power of heart, intellect, and unwavering dedication to making the world a better place for everyone. As Peter Parker continues to navigate this new chapter of his life, the evolution of New York City becomes intertwined with his personal journey of transformation. The city, once a battleground for Spider-Man's relentless fight against crime and corruption, is now a city that thrives on community building and grassroots activism. The changes Peter has helped to create in the social and political landscape begin to bear fruit. New York, once struggling with high crime rates and systemic inequities, slowly but surely begins to heal. The advancements in education, healthcare, and technology that Peter championed begin to show tangible results. Local schools that once lacked resources now flourish, as the youth of New York have more access to quality education and career opportunities. Peter's work, once focused solely on fixing the immediate issues facing the city, begins to shift toward creating lasting institutions that future generations can rely on. His scientific innovations, particularly in renewable energy and healthcare, start to change the city's infrastructure, making it more sustainable and accessible for everyone, regardless of their socio-economic status. Peter, now a public figure, also begins to reflect on his legacy. He understands that while he may never have been the masked hero who swung through the streets of New York, his impact is no less significant. The small daily efforts he's made to reform broken systems and build a more equitable society have created a legacy that will outlast any hero who fought with webs or strength. And yet, as his influence grows, Peter also realizes that the fight for justice is never over. The systems he has worked to dismantle are deeply entrenched, and the people he has worked with, those who share his vision of a better world, continue to face opposition from the powerful forces that seek to maintain the status quo. Despite the progress Peter has made, challenges remain. The remnants of the criminal empire once ruled by the kingpin have splintered into smaller factions, and these groups continue to wreak havoc on the streets. Though Peter is no longer Spider-Man, he is still the man who understands the undercurrents of New York's criminal world, and he is often called upon by law enforcement to offer his expertise. These moments serve as reminders that even without his powers, Peter's knowledge and experience make him a valuable ally in the fight against those who would seek to return New York to its old ways. His work now is more subtle, using his influence to guide law enforcement, offer intelligence, and coordinate efforts to address the remnants of organized crime. Peter's emotional growth is perhaps the most significant change in his life. Over the years, he has come to terms with the fact that he cannot control everything. The guilt over Uncle Ben's death, which once weighed him down as Spider-Man, is no longer a burden that dictates his actions. He understands that while he may never fully undo the past, he has the power to shape the future. In this sense, Peter's healing is not about forgetting the pain, but about learning to live with it and use it as a driving force for good. His relationship with Mary Jane, while still complicated at times, flourishes in this new reality. The space they've given each other to grow individually, combined with their shared commitment to their future together, creates a partnership that is stronger than it ever was during Peter's time as Spider-Man. Aunt May, who continues to be a source of guidance and support for Peter, remains an anchor in his life. Her wisdom, though tempered by the years, provides Peter with a sense of perspective that he might otherwise lack. As Peter's world grows larger, filled with new responsibilities and new faces, Aunt May remains a grounding presence, reminding him of the values that have shaped him from the beginning. Her health, though fragile, continues to be a concern, and Peter struggles with the inevitable reality of losing her. Yet, even in her later years, Aunt May encourages Peter to find peace within himself, to continue moving forward, and to never lose sight of the power of love and compassion. The people of New York, in their own quiet ways, begin to acknowledge the changes Peter has helped to bring about. Though Spider-Man's physical presence is no longer there, his influence lingers. People begin to look to Peter as a symbol of hope, not because of what he can do physically, but because of the moral compass he has provided. In this world, heroes are not just those who fight villains, they are those who fight for justice, equity, and the good of all. Peter's story, one of redemption, transformation, and perseverance, becomes the narrative of New York's ongoing growth and healing. As Peter looks to the future, he understands that his work is far from done. The city, though better than it once was, still faces many challenges. But Peter has learned that the fight for justice is not always immediate or dramatic. Sometimes, it is found in the quieter moments, those small decisions to fight for the things that matter most, even when the world doesn't see it. His journey, no longer defined by the presence of Spider-Man, is still one of heroism, a heroism based on intellect, compassion, and the belief that even the smallest actions can create ripple effects that change the course of history. And so, Peter continues his path, not as the Spider-Man of the past, but as the man who learned to make a difference in the world without the need for webs or superhuman strength. His legacy, one of love, service, and intellectual heroism, is one that will shape New York for generations to come. The city may never fully forget the wall-crawling hero who once defended it, but in time, it will come to understand that true heroism isn't always about the spectacular. Sometimes, it's about the quiet courage to do what's right, even when no one is watching. Peter Parker has found his place in the world, not through the battles he fought or the mask he wore, but through the person he has become, the person who continues to fight for a better future, one step at a time. As Peter Parker's influence in New York grows, so too does his understanding of what it truly means to lead and make a lasting impact. The city, once ravaged by crime and corruption, begins to reflect the changes Peter has worked so tirelessly to bring about. His voice, once a quiet whisper in the world of science and innovation, now reverberates with authority, not through his physical strength, but through the weight of his convictions. Peter's transformation from a masked vigilante to a respected leader within the city's reform movement highlights the true meaning of heroism. No longer is he the quick-witted acrobatic Spider-Man who swung from skyscraper to skyscraper, but a man who uses his intellect, his heart, and his strategic thinking to dismantle the systems that have long held people back. Peter's life becomes more intertwined with those he has helped and mentored. His influence is felt in the small victories of the communities he supported, and he begins to see how his efforts have created a ripple effect that is reshaping the city in profound ways. The organizations and initiatives he has helped build, from educational programs for at-risk youth to sustainable energy projects, are beginning to yield visible results. Peter realizes that the legacy of Spider-Man isn't in the physical battles or the visible feats of strength, but in the quieter moments when people begin to realize that their lives have been changed for the better. However, with this growing influence comes an increasing burden. Peter begins to feel the weight of his dual responsibilities, not only to the city, but also to the future generations he is helping shape. The pressure to live up to his past as Spider-Man never fully leaves him, despite his transformation. He still feels the fear of failing the people who depend on him, the same fear that once drove him as a young hero in a suit. While the pressure is different now, Peter is forced to confront his need to prove that he can be just as impactful without the mask. In his quieter moments, Peter grapples with a sense of inadequacy, wondering if his efforts are enough. The fear of not living up to expectations, both his own and those of others, begins to creep back into his thoughts. It is in these moments of vulnerability that Peter's relationship with Mary Jane deepens. Mary Jane, having supported Peter through his transition from Spider-Man to a more politically and socially active figure, now plays a pivotal role in grounding him. Their connection, while still tested by the demands of Peter's work, grows stronger as they learn to navigate life without the constant chaos of superhero battles. Mary Jane, ever patient and understanding, helps Peter see that he doesn't need to bear the weight of the world alone. She becomes a steady source of emotional support, reminding him that true heroism lies in living a life that reflects integrity, love, and resilience. Aunt May, too, continues to be a guiding force in Peter's life. Though her health deteriorates with age, her wisdom remains a wellspring of strength for Peter. As she watches him evolve into a leader who brings real, lasting change to the city, she expresses a quiet pride in the man he has become. Her unwavering faith in him, despite all the challenges he has faced, reinforces the values that Peter holds dear. As Peter watches Aunt May's health decline, he realizes that his greatest legacy will not be the title of Spider-Man, but the example he set in living a life dedicated to service and love. The sacrifices he made as a young man have led him to this point of emotional and intellectual maturity, and he begins to understand that the journey is just as important as the destination. Even as Peter moves forward in his life, the city of New York still faces challenges. The remnants of criminal activity, though weakened by Peter's efforts, remain a threat. The power structures that allowed figures like the Kingpin to rise still exist, and Peter knows that the battle for justice is ongoing. He continues to work behind the scenes to expose corruption, to reform institutions, and to fight for the marginalized. While the need for Spider-Man's physical presence may have lessened, Peter knows that the work he does now, helping others see their potential and guiding them to make a difference, is just as vital. New York itself becomes a reflection of Peter's evolution. As crime rates decline and the city's social infrastructure improves, Peter begins to see that the world he once fought to protect is changing for the better. The work he's done, the relationships he's built, and the lives he's touched all come together to create a city that, while not perfect, is more compassionate, more connected, and more resilient than it ever was before. Peter knows that his impact will never be fully measured by the number of villains defeated or the number of times he saved the day. Instead, his legacy will be defined by the small acts of kindness, the systems he helped build, and the people he inspired to keep fighting for justice, no matter how small the steps may seem. As Peter reflects on his journey, he realizes that the true heroism he sought was never about the fame, the mask, or the adrenaline of battle. It was about the quiet determination to improve the world, to fight for what's right even when it seemed impossible, and to never give up, no matter how many obstacles stood in his way. He learns that while the need for Spider-Man might have faded, the essence of who he is, Peter Parker, the man who cares, the man who never gives up, remains. He has discovered that heroism doesn't always need to be flashy or dramatic. It can simply be the consistency of doing the right thing, day after day, no matter how hard it may be. Peter's journey continues, not as Spider-Man, but as a man who has come to understand that the true power lies not in what we can do for ourselves, but in what we can do for others. And while the world may never see him in the same light it once did, Peter Parker knows that, in his heart, he is still the same person who once swore to use his gifts for good. He has just learned to do so in a way that speaks to the world's deeper needs, not through webs and punches, but through intellect, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to building a better tomorrow. Peter Parker's journey, one that began with the bite of a radioactive spider and the weight of responsibility it brought, has led him to an entirely new understanding of heroism. Without the powers of Spider-Man, Peter is forced to redefine what it means to make an impact. He comes to realize that heroism isn't defined by webs or superhuman strength, but by the quiet resilience to continue fighting for justice, to make choices that positively affect the world, and to inspire change in ways that are not always immediately visible. His story evolves from one of physical battles with villains to a deeper, more intellectual and emotional engagement with the world. Through his efforts in social reform, scientific innovation, and community building, Peter finds a new purpose, one that addresses systemic issues rather than individual conflicts. The Kingpin's empire may no longer be the immediate threat, but Peter knows that his work is far from over. New York, though changed, is still vulnerable, and the fight for justice continues. But now, Peter's role is not defined by his ability to swing into action in the blink of an eye. It's defined by the way he uses his intellect, resources, and compassion to make a lasting difference. His legacy lies not in grand battles, but in the steady, determined work to improve the world around him. In his personal life, Peter finds peace with his past and his relationships. His connection with Mary Jane grows deeper, and he learns that love requires balance and vulnerability, not just sacrifice. His relationship with Aunt May, though marked by the inevitability of her passing, serves as a reminder of the importance of family and emotional connection in the face of life's challenges. And as Peter continues to build the future, his journey is no longer defined by what he couldn't do as Spider-Man, but by what he has accomplished in his own quiet way, one step at a time. Peter's transformation from the troubled, power-driven Spider-Man to the thoughtful, community-focused Peter Parker is a testament to the idea that heroism is not about the physical feats we can perform, but about the way we choose to live our lives and affect change. His legacy, though different from what he once imagined, is no less meaningful. He has become a man who no longer needs a mask to be a hero. He is, in every sense, the man he was always meant to be, the person who fights for others, not with webs, but with heart, intellect, and a commitment to making the world a better place. And so, Peter Parker's story concludes not with the end of a chapter, but with the beginning of a new one. A story where heroism is not defined by extraordinary feats, but by the daily, ongoing commitment to build a world based on compassion, integrity, and justice. The city may have lost Spider-Man, but in his place, Peter Parker continues to be a hero, shaping the world in his own quiet, transformative way.